Good afternoon. I'm Tim Llewellyn. I'm a lay member from the Diocese of St David's, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to guide you through and chair session 4 of today's agenda. This session includes the following agenda items: Evangelism Fund, report from the University of Wales Trinity St David, the Lambeth Conference report, and a film for the Year of Prayer. And we're now at page 2 of the grey agenda booklet. So we'll start now with the Evangelism Fund and a presentation of the story so far. As part of the preparatory reading, you will have received a brief background note within your meeting papers. The Bishop of Swansea and Brecon, the Bishop with a portfolio for evangelism and church growth, will introduce the presentation. Then the project teams for St Asaph, led by the Reverend Andy Kitchen, lead pastor at Hope Street, and Mrs Diane McCarthy, Diocesan Secretary, non-member, and from Llandaff, Mr Paul Booth, Vision Programme Manager for Where Faith Matters Diocese of Llandaff, non-member, will give short presentations on the work so far in Hope Street, Young Faith Matters and Citizen Church. Presentations from project teams in the Diocese of Bangor and St David's will feature during the governing body's meeting in April 2023. Applications to the Evangelism Fund from the Diocese of Monmouth and Swansea and Brecon are being formed. There will be an opportunity for members to ask questions at the end of the presentation, and the Bishop will coordinate any answers to questions. I'd now like to hand over to Bishop John.
President Chair, John Lomas, Bishop of Swansea and Brecon. You may have seen me before. I do apologise. I'm up quite a bit this afternoon. The purpose of this item is to provide the governing body with an update on the projects. The projects have come into existence in dioceses following the award of the Evangelism Fund. The Evangelism Fund, as most of you know, was a £10 million fund set up by the representative body in 2018 to provide grant funding to dioceses for transformative projects that focus exclusively on evangelism and church growth. So far, 4 dioceses have been awarded these grants. That's St Asaph, Bangor, Llandaff and St David's. The Evangelism Fund Committee, which I now sit on as part of my portfolio for evangelism and church growth, is arranging a series of visits to each of the 4 projects to see them in action, to meet and to speak to those involved directly and to find out how the projects are going. The last 2 years have been easy for no one, and trying to launch big projects like these projects in the middle of a pandemic has been no easy task. And the committee wants to find out how the projects are going, what may have changed, what's working well, and where the challenges have been. So today, as we've been told, we'll be hearing from 2 of the projects, those in St Asaph and in Llandaff. The committee visited Hope Street Church in Wrexham in May and Citizen Church in Cardiff in July. Both visits were really positive, and we're planning visits to Bangor and St David's also, and they'll make presentations at the GB next year. The 4 active projects are very different, although both Hope Street and Citizen Church may feel to you quite similar in that they are of a more charismatic, a younger group vein, if you like. But overall, the projects are doing different things in their different contexts. So I'll leave them to introduce themselves and summarise the projects. But first, we're going to hear from St Asaph project team. This was the first grant made from the Evangelism Fund, after which we hear from them. There'll be opportunity to ask questions, and then we'll hear from Paul Booth, Diocesan Director of Mission in Llandaff. He'll talk about the 2 strands of the project in Llandaff, Citizen Church and Young Faith Matters. Again, after the presentation, we'll invite questions. So I'll hand over to you both. The St Asaph team will talk about Hope Street in Wrexham. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody, governing body. It's a real privilege to be invited to speak to you and to give you an update on the work that's happening in Hope Street. I'm Diane McCarthy. I'm a non-member of the governing body, but I'm the Diocesan Secretary for the Diocese of St Asaph, and I was a member of the bid team that put together the original bid to the Evangelism Fund.
And I am Andy Kitchen, elected member for St Asaph, and together with my wife Rachel, we were appointed senior leaders of Hope Street Project back in 2019.
2019 feels a long time ago, doesn't it? Just in terms of years, but also when we think of everything that's happened since then. So we want to just start with a very short film which outlines the vision and where we started from 4 years ago now. Thank you.
Wrexham, the beating heart of North Wales. Historically a town of tailors and brewers, miners and soldiers. Today, a centre of education and industry, a melting pot of history and cultures.
Behind me is Hope Street, and number 1 here is currently being transformed, reimagined as a home for a new community, a new expression of church named after its location. And we believe that this word hope, written into the architecture of this place, points to the secure hope that we have in the person of Jesus, something that we're pretty excited about.
In the Bible, Jesus describes a great banquet, a huge celebration to which everyone is invited. It's an invitation home to a table where there's always space to pull up a chair.
Our vision is to not just build a church, but to be a people of hope that would play our part in transforming a nation. That Wrexham, that Wales would be famous for love, made alive by the God who is making all things new, recognised as a place overflowing with laughter and kindness, where hunger and loneliness are things of the past, and where homes are places of flourishing and joy, in which dreams are birthed for an expansive future, and where lives are marked by courage, adventure and purpose.
And at the centre of it all is a God with his arms wide open, who has never stopped loving us and never will, where his church is gathered around the table telling stories of lives made whole, saying, "The search is over, we've found what we've been looking for, and his name is Jesus."
Well, that film was filmed in the kind of middle of 2020 on a day when things were still quite locked down in different parts of Wales. And 2 years on, you know, in many ways, so many things have changed. Initially, we spent the time between 2019 and 2020 planning and recruiting a team before moving to Wrexham in the summer of 2020. And a big part of our focus as a team has been finding ways to connect with people who don't know Jesus. Initially, that had to take place online. We advertised and ran an online alpha course, produced online kids resources, organised hangouts like pub quizzes, and then connected with people through Zoom coffees. Wrexham is a big football town. If you've been watching any of the recent Hollywood production, you'll know that. And one of the ways I'd particularly like to highlight that we've connected with young men has been through a football ministry called Bridge the Gap, a result of our partnership with the Church of Army Centre of Mission in Wrexham. What began as a group finding a way to connect and keep fit during the pandemic quickly grew to over 60 young men playing football each week and becoming a community. At the heart of it is a team from within the church and the Centre of Mission dedicated to praying for and caring for them. And what's been striking has been the diversity. Border Force officers and policemen getting to know individuals seeking asylum. Polish builders, lads from the warehouse becoming friends with students and a clinical psychologist. And so many from there have said that it's been a lifeline for them over the last few years. A number have asked for Bibles, and we're expecting a number from there on Alpha this term. In January 21, we launched weekly Sunday services online, and our online services continued since then. And meanwhile, work on the refurbishment of the building was nearing completion, and we received the keys in March 21, and over the summer term began to meet in person. Number 1 Hope Street is a former Burton store which closed its doors in 2008, and its top floor has been a dance hall and a bingo hall amongst other things, and is now our worship space. But we've been really aware that the ground floor in the heart of the town centre, with glass down two sides of the building, has this opportunity for us to be this outward-facing presence, literally putting the community of church in the shop window. But we've been aware that that has to take place on so much more of the week than Sundays. So as restrictions have allowed, the ground floor has been a brilliant space to run courses from, including Alpha, parenting and money management courses. We've started a parent and toddler group called Bouncing Beans. College Cafe, a drop-in for students at the huge FE college in the town centre, has started on a Thursday, and Hope Street Youth takes place on a Sunday afternoon. There's also a prayer room on the ground floor. And the building was in fact awarded Community Building of the Year for Wales at the Local Authority Building Control Awards last year, which is a real testimony to the team from the diocese and others that have been in charge of the refurbishment. Key to all of this was key to all of these spaces being able to be open during the week and modelling a welcome and hospitality to Wrexham has always been this idea of a coffee business. And we were delighted this year to employ a Welsh-speaking couple from within the church to complete the commercial kitchen on the ground floor and in May open Tabernacle. The aim of all of these different types of activities is to create this big fuzzy edge to the church community. And at the heart of those spaces, to have a passionate, fervent group of followers of Jesus inviting people in further. And I'm delighted to say that that is what has been happening. People walking past on a Sunday expecting to come in for coffee and instead discovering Jesus. People invited by work colleagues or friends from the school gate. People coming in inquisitive about what is happening to the former Burton store and staying. You know, we've started this project during the pandemic, and in terms of its impact, we're probably a year behind schedule in terms of the original project programme, primarily because of delays to the building, but also recruitment, and so we've rolled back the time horizon of the kind of initial stage of funding a year. Also, our work with students has been hampered as Glyndŵr University hasn't really been operating in-person teaching, but we hope that's going to change coming from this coming September in a few weeks' time. People ask me what has surprised me about the last couple of years. Well, there's probably been lots, but one of the things is that people are younger and more diverse than we'd expect, than we've been told to expect. There's a diversity of language already within our congregation. We have this large group of refugees from El Salvador that have recently joined the church. And at the last Alpha course, we had subtitles in Spanish. We had a Welsh-speaking group as well within it. And we've got 6 Ukrainians in the church as well. One of the other things that surprised me, I guess, as well, is that there's this perception of Wrexham as this struggling town which seems to get passed by on the way to the north coast. And in some ways that's true. Wrexham faces significant challenges and many people are struggling. But at the same time, this bold statement of investing in Wrexham by the diocese and the church in Wales has also coincided with a different story beginning to be told about the town. Sorry about that sound. Of a confident re-emergence of a post-industrial city, which I can now describe Wrexham as of this week, a regional centre of education and commerce. And what we found is that investing in this type of resource church model of church planting is bearing fruit and does work somewhere like Wrexham. We're seeing people come to faith, probably about 20 so far, plus numerous others that are exploring and on that journey. We've seen growth numerically and spiritually, whilst at the same time, St Giles across the road, the traditional parish church has continued to grow and thrive under the leadership of Jason and his team there. We're beginning to see people feel a sense of calling towards ordained ministry. And whilst it's early days and our timeline for church planting has been set back a little bit, we are about to start an internship program, which is part of the strategy of developing a pipeline of training towards ordination and church planting. And we are currently looking at planting opportunities in 2024. I'm now going to hand over to Diane McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Andy. I want to speak to you a little bit and take this opportunity to share a little bit about how the learning from Hope Street is already shaping the ministry and mission across the Diocese of St Asaph. Could I have my slides, please, Mike? Thank you. At the beginning of 2022, Bishop Gregory launched our manifesto for the next chapter of the life of the diocese, and we refocused our mission, establishing our core values of growing faith, bringing hope, and demonstrating love. And we've often reflected that actually those values work better the other way round, in that it's only really by demonstrating love to people that we can then bring them hope and ultimately grow faith with them. There's a real need that people feel to belong before they can believe, is part of our experience. But these values are now at the heart of everything that we do, and we try to continually measure what we do against them and hold ourselves accountable to them. We recognised when we made our bid to the Evangelism Fund Committee the importance of sharing the learning from and the blessing that we believed that Hope Street would be across the whole of our diocese. And our hope and our prayer was always that God would ensure that this investment would bless the whole of the diocese in time, and indeed the whole of the Church in Wales. In terms of the essential learning, I think the first thing that we learned was that the need to share these lessons was urgent. The pandemic has accelerated, hasn't it, in so many ways, but it has always been the case, certainly in recent decades, that such a small proportion of the population of Wales know the love of God in their lives. So the need for mission and evangelism is urgent. We're blessed with so many opportunities. We see evidence every day and all over our diocese of where God is at work, and I'm sure it's the same for all of you in whichever part of Wales you're called to serve. We recognise that we need to be accountable, and there was a great question about that earlier today. We need to be disciplined in what we do. When we can see so much need and so much opportunity, it's tempting to get involved everywhere, but actually our resources are precious and we need to use them in an intentional way. And then finally, we've reflected on our shared life. We know that we all have more in common than we don't, than divides us. And we all need to be humble and receptive in our learning and being prepared to admit when we don't always get things right. And right from the beginning, we said if we don't make any mistakes, then we're not being bold enough. We're not being brave enough. We should be pushing at the edges. And if things don't work out as we expect them to, then we learn from that. And that makes us stronger and better disciples for the future. So the key learnings, I've summarised these points on this slide, and these are the key principles that we've tried to keep in mind as we've started to spread the learning from Hope Street across the Diocese of St Asaph. Firstly, the importance of resourcing the grassroots of our church. That's where the energy, the passion for mission comes, and where people have connections with their local communities. We need to trust and enable our people by saying yes as often as possible. And that includes all of our leadership, ordained and lay. Shared ministry has been at the heart of what we called 2020 Vision, didn't we, 10 years ago, when we had the Harris Review and we started to work through. We have to empower and trust these people. Everything that we do has to be locally appropriate. What works in one area may not work somewhere else for a very good reason. And that comes back to the trust of our local leadership and our local people on the ground who know their communities, who are engaged and connected and can make sure that what we do is appropriate for their context. We learnt that our community engagement projects, and Andy's talked to you about some of those, whether it's work with the food bank, whether it's the football projects, whether it's our dementia cafes, these make great connections with local communities. And they give the church a real voice with people that don't yet know the love of Jesus in their lives. And it also re-energises, we've found, many long-standing members of the Teulu Asaph who found in this form of mission and discipleship a real new expression of their faith. Partnership working, I mentioned humility earlier. We don't have to be in charge of everything. We certainly don't have the skills to do everything that God is calling us to do. So we need to find and work with those people that share our core values and are able to enhance what we're able to do. And finally, the team, and that came out really strongly, I think, in the Swansea and Brecon presentation, that wonderful presentation that we've just listened to. One person can't do it all. We wear ourselves out and we risk burnout, particularly at times where the whole of the nation is under stress, isn't it, post-COVID, and now as we face the next set of challenges of the cost of living crisis, which again the Archbishop reflected on so powerfully in his opening address. But a team can bring a breadth of skills, energy, support and resilience. And you saw, again, in the montage of photographs on Andy's slides, many of the people that have given their skills, their time and their resources to Hope Street. The job of leadership, again, as somebody else reflected earlier, is to enable the whole people of God to flourish, not to keep that power to ourselves and try to do it all. So, what we're looking at the moment as we try to share this learning is a new concept called Mission Hub Churches. And we've tried to encompass these principles in launching our own programme of Mission Hub Churches in the second half of 2021. And that for us is about investing in reinvigorating, giving confidence and resources to our existing churches and our congregations and the wonderful leadership that they have. Initially, last year in 2021, we launched one Mission Hub church in each archdeaconry, and we intentionally chose very different locations and very different contexts so that we could really test this concept. We put in each Mission Hub church a team, a Mission Hub leader who is a stipendiary priest who is part of the existing complement, and we gave them a curate and a paid lay worker to support the work that they're doing there. And we very much allowed the team to decide what type of person they wanted. So some Mission Hub churches have got youth workers, others have got community outreach workers. They've decided that themselves in consultation with the local community. These Mission Hub churches are already embedded in their communities. For example, the Mission Hub Church in Pensarn, which is on the north coast of Wales, has done, just completed for the second year, a Shore to Shore, an amazing 6-week work where litter-picking pilgrims walk along the North Wales coast and pray and speak out to the communities that we're called to serve. There's inspirational schools work happening in the other Mission Hub churches, community schools as well as church schools, as we go out to meet the people in those communities where they are. We've launched an additional centre of mission in partnership with the Church Army in Pensarn. Our Church Army Centre of Mission in Kaya Park, which was established well before we even had the first thought of the resource church, undoubtedly tilled the ground. It connected us with many of those communities, and so we've been blessed enough to find additional funding to support the Wrexham Centre of Mission in a sustainable way, which has now meant that the diocesan resources have gone into the North Wales coast, Pensarn, which is Abergele, Colwyn Bay, Rhyl, an area of significant social deprivation. And we're busy tilling the land there and praying in readiness for what we hope will be our first major full resource church plant out of Hope Street. And we respond positively to growth, to energy and growth wherever we find it. Just developing that point on my next slide. As a Bishop staff team this year in 2022, as part of the launch of the new manifesto, we've been thinking about how we can make space for where there are really good things, where God is at work across the diocese. And it's too easy, isn't it, at these challenging times, and we looked at the numbers where there are fewer stipendiary clergy. We're all trying to do more with less. And it's too easy for our day-to-day time to be dominated by the challenges, the emergencies, goodness, the pandemic, if nothing else. None of us saw that coming. So how do we intentionally make space to see where God is at work and where we can support the good things that are already happening? And to have some humility as a team, that we don't have to have all the good ideas. It's happening all around us already. As I said, God is at work, and we need to trust our local leaders. And that's about supporting and taking time to say thank you and to acknowledge success where it's happening in its many different forms, the beautiful richness and diversity that we've reflected on several times today. to keep connected with where the Spirit is moving, and to learn our lessons and take things forward. So I just wanted to now share with you a case study of our fourth Mission Hub Church, which we've opened quite unexpectedly this year in Estuarine Mountain Mission Area, and that's centred around the Holywell area. I want to share with you an email. I'm going to just read it to you because the priest that sent this says it far better than I could, that landed in early May this year. And it's entitled A Bold Request. The reason I feel bold enough to write is because of the number of opportunities that I feel that God is opening up in Holywell and in the surrounding communities in our mission area, and the incredible contribution that a children and young people's worker would make to our work. Here are some of the opportunities that we've discerned. St. Peter's New All Age service is attracting 100 plus people each month, and there is a committed team working to build this up. However, we don't have the resources to move those who come from attendance to genuine discipleship. Now, you remember what I said about community outreach, and you can see on there, the top left-hand corner, is what we started off calling the food club during the pandemic. People paid £2 and they could select 15 groceries for the food that was on offer. We've renamed it the table because that feels a more dignified way, and it reflects better what we're doing. And we found that the people that used that facility wanted to come and serve. They wanted to volunteer and help other people who were in the same situation as themselves. They might not have had much money, but they did have time, and they knew what it felt like to be in a position of wanting to use that facility. And we've moved them to a new service, so we're helping them now to grow in faith. But we found that St. Peter's is a very modern church, but even what we would have described as a very accessible service did not work for people that had no existing relationship. So a new service was set up, and as you've heard, that's attracting over 100 people each month to that service. Our new Sunday school in Greenfield is growing, and we're almost reaching a point where we cannot accommodate, because of the number of helpers, all the children that come. We have a new church school in Lixham and an established church school in neighbouring Whitford, together with deepening relationships with community schools across the area. My experience here is that the schools are wanting more than we can offer with our current levels of resource. There's a group of very committed lay people who want to grow faith in children and young people, but lack the confidence and the time to do more. Very much what Heather was asking earlier. Where can paid people work to give confidence and experience and training to our volunteers who want to help but might not feel confident in doing so? The Wellbeing at St James Project hopes to include a whole range of activities for young people, but this won't flourish unless we can build a wider set of relationships in the town. We talked about heritage building. You can just see St James behind the picture with Bishop Gregory, which is the central church, the old parish church in Holywell, and it's by the site of St Winifred's Well, clues in the name, Holywell. And there's an ambitious project there for wellness at St James, and to rebuild that. And so to celebrate our building, rather than seeing it as a problem, in partnership with the very modern St Peter's. I know this is a very bold request, but I've prayed over this, and I don't want money to be the only thing stopping us from growing our ministry. So I felt it was better to ask and get a no, rather than to be left wondering what if. Well, this request came in early May. Our DBF, Board of Finance, was meeting in the middle of May, and we turned round a proposal for them. And bless our Diocesan Board of Finance, they dug a little bit deeper, and they said, how can we not respond to a request like that, where God is clearly at work, and where they could see the principles that we'd outlined, that we were learning from the work at Hope Street as a way of regenerating and building our existing congregations and communities. So I share that case study with you as to how things are happening all the time, and the need to be responsive and to be fleet of foot. And my heart sang this morning hearing the Archbishop's address, and also the words of Professor Medwin Hughes talking about the commitment of the representative body to investing, because with more resources, as Bishop John's just reflected in his last session, we can do more, and we can do things faster, and we can bring more people to know the love of God in their life. So I just want to finish by saying a huge thank you to the representative body trustees, because this has been an investment over many years. Many of you here will remember the Transformation Fund and how we used that, a much smaller pot of money. But in the Diocese of St Asaph, we used it to invest in leading your church into growth, which opened people's eyes to the ways in which we could grow the church and the imperative of doing so. And we used it to establish our mission areas, which has really given us the base to now develop these new initiatives. And we also invited the inspirational Mark Iaconelli over for a residency, who told us some real truths that we didn't want to hear and we weren't ready to hear back in 2014. But he said them anyway, and over time, the truth of that has become apparent to us. And then there's the Evangelism Fund. It's given us the wonderful exposition that you've heard of Hope Street, but it's also given us confidence as a diocese that if we're faithful and we listen to where the Spirit's moving, then God will bless us, and he will bless us richly. So I thank the trustees and all of the church in Wales for trusting us with that money. I hope we've given you a flavour of how we've used it and how we've tried to be accountable and how we've tried to learn our lessons. And we hope that we'll have increased opportunities now to continue to grow faith, bring hope, and demonstrate love to all of our communities. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
We're going to invite questions now. If there are any questions for Diane and for Andy, then please do ask them at this point. If you want to go to the other mic, that might help. Thanks, Mike.
Firstly, thank you for, again, a very inspiring presentation. I very much understand why a diocese, a DBF, and the people who make the important financial decisions within the diocese would want to focus resources particularly on those areas that are demonstrating growth and success. But how do we as a church find the right balance then between doing that and also encouraging people to try things new and risk making the mistakes that don't produce success? They don't end up in growth. Sometimes, in my experience, people after a great deal of prayer and discernment will take initiatives that fall flat. And if they repeat that, eventually you can get to a position where the decision makers might decide, well, we're not going to support them in particular ways anymore. So how do you find that balance? Is this something that you've experienced in St Asaph, and if so, how have you dealt with it? Thank you.
Diane, I think that's your question.
Thank you, Mike. It's a great question, and it's not an easy one to answer. But what I would say is that what we have is in St Asaph is a special support scheme, which we activate where people are struggling, but we know that we need to keep investing and keep going. Keep keeping the faith there. And you know, we've talked to you about some of what we found almost is actually we've spent more time and more resources supporting in those areas, and that's really important. But that we just needed to tweak the balance a little bit and to recognise where really good things were happening, because that actually inspires and encourages everybody, and we can learn lessons. But it is hard, and sometimes things are not of their time, and we are a church of death and resurrection, aren't we? But I think one of the hardest things is letting go of things that might be very, very, very precious and very close to us at the moment. And if we're able to do that well, involved in a closure of a church at the moment, which had the potential to be a very difficult one. It's in one of our post-industrial communities in the outskirts of Wrexham, actually. But we've been working very hard with our communications officer, Karen, and learning some lessons from some very wise previous archdeacons. Some of you remember Chris Potter, who was Dean of St Asaph Cathedral and also the Archdeacon of St Asaph at one point. And he always talked about reflecting on the history and the journey of a community that's gone through, and celebrating what's happened, and then moving people and creating that record that's there, because we will always be part of the history, part of the story of a community that's shaped it to where it is now, and acknowledging and honouring that as part of a permanent legacy. So sometimes where there are difficult decisions that have to be made, trying to do that as kindly and as dignified a way as possible, but also offering as much support as possible before we get to that stage. And our special support scheme has often, sometimes it's a couple of years breathing space to people to really reimagine, to regroup, and a space to do things a little bit differently, and to be sure that we really have exhausted all possibilities before trying to move to an agreed conclusion. But I don't think there's any way of doing that without some pain. And we will always, won't we, have the full spectrum. Not everything will work. We won't be able to make a success of everything we do. But the important thing, I think, is to learn from what happens, and then to do whatever we do as well as we possibly can.
I think we need to be conscious of the time. We're eager to hear from Llandaff as well, so I'll probably just call a halt to the questions there, and then we'll move on to the Llandaff.
Sorry about that. We're going to invite Paul Booth now. He's the Diocesan Director of Mission in Llandaff. You're going to talk about our two strands of mission over there.
Prynhawn Conference. My name is Paul Booth, the recently appointed Director of Mission for Llandaff. There are two parts to the amazing funding that we've had in Llandaff for the Evangelism Fund, and so I'd like to divide them into two so that we can field some questions on Young Faith Matters first, and then we'll look at Citizen Church. There is a very calm persona about me at the moment. However, we have had problems with an MP4 where in the last 20 minutes we're grateful that you've spoken so long because nothing was working, and we've actually just put another presentation together. And I was thinking, thank you for all those lovely key learning points, because they were exactly what we were going to say, but ours didn't work. So thank you. It was a God moment. I'd like to introduce the first of our films this afternoon. We're praying that number 2 works, so we're just buying them a little bit more time. Young Faith Matters we've employed 5 engagement workers that are working across the diocese. And I think the issue of priority is really and becoming more important to us. The research that came out of Hope University at the end of last year in terms of young people in the church demonstrated how the church in general, whatever the denomination, has struggled to re-engage with young people. And more than ever, as the church, we need to be reaching the lost, not just intergenerationally, but specifically those people that will be sat where you're sat today, because it's God's church and he loves everyone. And so there is a real heart behind reaching into the communities and how we do that. And I want to focus on 1 or 2 of the specific things that you'll see in this very short film that was made by the team themselves. So we've not spent any money on videography. I've said you've got to do it off your own bat. So I'd like to introduce the first of our films, which is Young Faith Matters. There's just a couple of the initiatives that I'd like to highlight this afternoon to you. As you can see, there's an awful lot going on, and what particularly thrills me is the number of new initiatives that have come from the ministry areas that have just been created really this year. And to see that people are really looking forward and focusing and thinking, how can we make a difference and embrace the young people that are in our communities? And one of the ways that we're finding very effective, and we've actually entered into a partnership with the Proton Foundation, a course that's called Flourish. Any of you that work in schools, my background is education, will know that there is a crisis in health and well-being amongst young people. And Flourish is a Christian project that's been written by experts that takes children through an 8-week course. And the school actually recommends the children to go on the course. We've actually partnered to train 20 people. We've already filled those spaces. We think we need to go much bigger because the demand from schools is so much greater. And it's an opportunity for us as the church to step into and support schools, both community schools and church schools, with something that is of great need. And I was talking to one of the clergy that did the training this last weekend, and she said, that is the best training that I've ever been on. I said, I won't tell anybody in St. Paddens that you said that. But we come and we highly recommend that to you as a fantastic investment that the Evangelism Fund enables you to do, because it makes a direct impact on children's lives, but also sends a clear message into the community that we care, that the church is at a point where the church is being called to actually stand up and act in faith, because the crisis that we're in is affecting many who are trying to recover from COVID, and this just compounds it. And it's God's opportunity for us, and that's how the team are seeing it. We're very fortunate that we were able to employ a Welsh-speaking Young Faith Matters engagement worker, and so we can deliver through the medium of Welsh as well. So it means that we can cover all of the community schools and also our church schools as well. I just wonder, Bishop John, if we could just pause here and take any questions now before we move on to the Citizen Church. Now, I'm not sure. The rapidly appearing of Mark and Bree seems to tell me that we've had another fail. Anyway, could we, is that okay? Are you happy for that?
Absolutely. We could do the same as we did last time. Are there any questions? If you want to come over to the other microphone.
I'll say here.
Yeah, it's good. And relax.
Perfect. We were going to be showing you a film at this point. Due to technical hitches, I've got the, just so happened that on governing body is the Associate Vicar of Citizen Church, Mark Simpson, and also just about to start Ordinand, Brianna Roos, one of the products of Citizen Church, and they're going to come and do a presentation. Now, be very, very kind to them, because they've literally had 45 seconds to practice this, as we were just trying again and again and again to see what the bug was, but we couldn't get rid of the bug. So I'm going to hand over to you, splendid people.
Thank you, Paul. Mark Simpson, elected cleric, Llandaff.
Brianna Rouse, lay co-opted Llandaff.
And we've also been co-opted into doing a presentation, which we're delighted to do, and share some stories of a wonderful last year or so that we've had at Citizen Church in Cardiff, and as part of the Llandaff Diocese. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Evangelism Fund and the courage and boldness that's been shown by the church over recent years. And as the Dean of Brecon said earlier, the name that we chose for the Church of Citizen references our citizenship with the saints and our desire for everyone to feel included and find a place of belonging in the church. Next slide, please, Mike. We were due to launch services in September of 2020, but then COVID happened, and our building works only started in the October of 2020, and we were able in the February of 2021 to launch recordings of services, worship events with a small studio audience, as it were, in the church, and put those out on YouTube on a Sunday morning. And then in the April of 2021, 25th of April, we launched in-person Sunday services at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. And since then, we've seen a remarkable growth, and we reckon we're a church of about 500 people now who would say that they belong to Citizen Church. Next slide, please. Our vision as part of the HTB network is to play our part in the evangelization of the nation, the revitalization of the church, and the transformation of society. The HTB network launched as a church planting initiative from Holy Trinity Brompton in the Diocese of London, has been resourcing church plants. We were just one of 21 church plants in 2020 across, predominantly England and Wales. Next slide, thank you. And specifically for us, we see our mission as breaching loneliness, breaking stereotypes of church, building the kingdom of God, bringing people home. We want to break the misunderstandings, the conceptions that so many young people have of church, and find a way to enable them to belong. And our first church building has been in Cathays. Thank you, Mike. Next slide. But the intention from the beginning for us, from the diocese, has been that we would be a resourcing church to plant into other church buildings through the diocese as our principal sort of channel of resourcing. Thank you. Next slide. So our Sunday morning service is very family focused, very active, with songs for the children to join in with. The children have begun to outgrow the venue that we've got for them. We've had as many as 65 children on a recent Sunday, trying to fit into a repurposed vicarage. And next slide, please. And our evening service, we take away the chairs, and it's stripped back, it's dark, and it's fun, and it's really aimed at late teens through to young adults, 16 to 30, that sort of age range. And we always have pizza after the service. Thank you. Next slide. And next slide, we have what we call a Connect Corner, where we try and create a space where people can belong to the church. We have church merch, so people who can get a cup or a hoodie or a t-shirt with church branding on. They do it for all their other clubs as students, so why not for church? So they can feel that they belong. Thank you. Next slide. And next slide. And I'll hand over to Bree, who's our head of students and Alpha, to talk about our services.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so 6 months after we launched, we held our very first baptism service. We baptized 21 people, which was just incredible. And just some numbers for you, we had 450 people come and join us in the room that day. And we had 229 people watching live online. So that's about 680 at least, meaning that if everybody was watching online, they were watching on their own. But just to give you kind of a story from one of those people that got baptized, we had a student who studies tech at USW, and he kind of got involved through the church because a friend of his said, oh, there's this church with quite a cool tech setup. Do you want to get involved? Do you want to help put on these events there? And he kind of said, yeah, sure, why not? And so he ended up serving on Alpha. He ran all of our tech for Alpha, ended up sitting in on all of the videos, and at the end of it thought, do you know what, I want to be a part of this, and ended up getting baptized. And he was a classic example of somebody that belonged before they believed, and that's definitely one of the things that we hope for at Citizen. And then next slide. We had our very first Christmas at Citizen Church in December, and we ran 4 services at our Cathays campus, one of which was our Carols by Candlelight service that we had 400 people come to, which was a little bit of a health and safety nightmare, wasn't it? But it was incredible. We had around 1,000 people come to across our 4 Christmas services, and it was just such an incredible time, an incredible way to kind of kickstart Christmas at Citizen. And then next slide, thank you. Alpha is part of our DNA as a church. Alpha launched from HTB London in 1977. Over 30 million people have done Alpha. It runs in 169 countries and 112 languages. And so it was one of the main things that we absolutely wanted to do at Citizen. In fact, we say that we came to run Alpha and we have a church off the back of it. And Alpha has been incredible. We've had 345 people come and do Alpha with us over the last year, in person and online, and some of those obviously feeding into the baptisms that I mentioned earlier. But it's been an incredible thing to be a part of, and to see people coming to faith, students inviting their housemates, their flatmates, their course mates to come and join us, young adults inviting their colleagues. It's been a real incredible opportunity. And the next slide. And then this year in April, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary. And as part of that, you can see in the middle, we produced a magazine that basically tells our story, tells the story of everything that has happened over the last year, with stories of people coming to faith, stories of Citizen Coffee. We have a converted horse box in our courtyard that we turned into a coffee shop, because not everybody's going to step into church, but everybody loves coffee. So that was kind of our gateway to get people in. So it's got stories of all sorts of things. So if you'd like a copy of that, I'm sure we can get one to you. But we produced that as part of our 1 year, and we also produced our first ever single, our first worship song called Love Like This, which you can find on Spotify, I'm sure. But it was such a celebration of everything that God had done over that first year, and we had a great time enjoying that. And then I'll pass back to Mark.
Thank you. Let's skip that slide. And the next one, we did some. Yeah, we'll skip that, I think. Thank you. It's probably corrupted anyway, like the other file. We did some number crunching for our first anniversary, and one of the statistics to pull out there, you might not be able to see the text in the bottom where it says number 4. We've been able to train up 4 refugees and asylum seekers as baristas. One of the big issues for people who arrive in Cardiff, which is a city of sanctuary from other countries, is not being employable or needing a training in something. And we've been able to offer training for them through our coffee van. And that's been a real privilege for us. Next slide. As we look to plant, we've been invited to smaller and larger locations within the diocese. And so we find it helpful to think of these in terms of 2 types, hubs and campuses. Hubs, next slide, are smaller, mission-focused, little footholds in a community, as it were. Campuses are a larger stronghold within a more urban area, with a remit to then resource into surrounding smaller communities. And together we think of those as locations. And so getting our thinking straight as we're prepared to church plant and grow, we find that casting a vision for growth to the community, to the church congregation, showing that what's the next thing, it does energize and incentivize people. It motivates them, it gets them behind and gets them involved in God's mission. So our first church plant is in Senghennydd, the community that suffered the worst mining disaster in British history in the early part of the 20th century. Over 430 men and boys lost their lives as a coal mine collapsed. And they've seen a lot more collapsing around them in Senghennydd over recent decades as church buildings have closed, as community services have shut down, and we've been invited to open up that church building again. It's such a privilege for us. And Saturday is painting day. We've got a painting party going there on Saturday. The paint was delivered yesterday. A member of our congregation who owns a paint company delivered it for free. And so we're getting to open that building up again. We've got our first outdoor event there on Sunday afternoon, an outdoor cinema showing. Next slide, you can see a bit of the community there. And we've also been invited to Pontypridd, St Mary's Glyntaf, near the Treforest campus of the University of South Wales. And we're just awaiting faculties, but we are looking forward very much to launching there, hopefully before Christmas. We had our first party, our Ponty party, Some people called it the Ponty Q. It was a barbecue in Ponty. What was the other? A party preeve. Party preeve, yeah. About 60 people came. Some neighbours just wandered in to see what was going on. People from our church community who live in that vicinity wanting to support the new ministry. People from partner churches in the diocese nearby also wanting to support and show their blessings. So it was a great party to kick things off, and we're looking forward to launching that very soon, later in the autumn. Thank you very much. The next slide, we don't need to go into in detail, but one of the most gratifying things is seeing the ownership that people have in the project. And so the giving has gone up. I'm probably not meant to show this slide. Is that what's coming through on the phone? Anyway, no. It's there. You can see it. It doesn't matter. It's there for posterity. But we're really pleased at seeing people wanting to get behind by giving. And so next slide, how we operate. We want everyone to be as involved as they want to be. We run an internship program. And so we've just got a new crop of interns who've started. We train them up. It's almost part of the discernment process for them if they want to go into full-time ministry, lay or ordained. Ordinands, we've seen 5 members of our church, including Bree, be sponsored for training for ordination in the church in Wales, which that is a number that means a lot to us. It might be a small number, but after only a year and a half, we're very proud of that. And we want to support more and more people as we resource not just our own church, but the wider church through ordinands coming through. We have clergy as well. We're very blessed to have a clergy team of our own, 2 vicars and a curate who's recently started with us as we look to plant across multiple locations. And thanks to the support of the Evangelism Fund, we are able to deploy a staff team as well, who can bring specialisms in particular areas, working with children and families, working with music and production, all these different areas. In fact, it's worth saying that of our ordinands, we don't expect them all to stay on and join us in the future as clergy. In fact, one of our ordinands has started a curacy in another ministry area within the diocese in the last few months. And so we see that as part of the way that we resource the wider life of the diocese. Do you want to talk about our building blocks, Bree?
Thanks, Mark.
Or do you want to skip on? You can skip on to
We'll skip that one, shall we? Can we go to the next slide? I'll talk about these in more depth. So Hangouts are kind of our version of what you might know as a small group. So we meet every night of the week across the city. We're just about to relaunch them again for this coming term. We have the kind of structure of gather and grow. So we'll kind of do 1 week is more of a social thing, a bit more of an opportunity to invite your friends to the pub or whatever that might look like. And then the following week would be more of a grow. So studying the Bible together, a bit more discipleship, that sort of thing. And I think we have currently about 40 Hangouts, but obviously we want to grow that. As a church of 500, we want, at least 60, 70 Hangouts is our aim. And then next slide. Teams are kind of how we serve our city. We have got all sorts of teams that help run Citizen Coffee, teams that lead worship, teams that are on production, like I mentioned earlier, with our students, teams that serve food at Alpha, our justice team who serve our community so well through Love Christmas, through training refugees on our coffee van, through going and running like kids groups for kids whose parents are learning English and refugees. Next slide. Sorry, I'm aware of time. Alpha, I've already spoken about that. Next slide. Students, we're based in the heart of Cathays, home to 80,000 students across 4 universities. We are so blessed to be in that area and to be able to serve our students so well. And, coming out of COVID has been a really tough time for a lot of them. So we love our students. I don't know what more there is to say on that one. Maybe we could skip a couple of slides forward to Citizen Coffee. We've kind of already mentioned this, but Citizen Coffee, that's our converted horse box that we use to serve our community. And if you go to the next slide, you can see one of our refugees who we trained on the van, who then went on to get a job.
I think we can finish there.
Yeah? Great, we'll finish there. Sorry for the messiness of it all.
Thank you. We have no time for questions, unless I want to get punched off Simon, and I don't. No time for questions. I just want to thank you, though. Thank you, Mark, Bree, Paul, Diane, Andy. We have got 20 seconds to pray. Let's just bow our heads and pray and give thanks for the evangelism fund bit. Father, give us the eyes to see the sparks that you would have us blow into flames. Give us the courage to hear your words and carry out your actions. Give us the love to transform our communities, ourselves, our lives for you. Build your kingdom through the evangelism fund bid, through our brothers and sisters and the work that they do and the projects that they lead. And bring us all to your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop John. So we now move on to agenda item number 13, which is the report of the University of Wales Trinity St David. In your preparatory papers, you received a very comprehensive annual report of the University of Wales Trinity St David, and the motion before us now... Sorry? Sorry, someone's saying they didn't get it, or no? Well, apparently there's a version electronic document also on the Church in Wales website if you haven't had the document. Apologies if you didn't receive that. So the motion before us is that the report of the University of Wales Trinity St David be received, and I'm delighted to introduce the proposer, Professor Medwyn Hughes, the Vice-Chancellor of the University, and it will be seconded by the Archbishop. And before asking Professor Hughes to start, I'd just like to remind you that 2022 marks the bicentenary of the foundation of the university in 1882. As well as a programme of events during the year, the bicentenary commemorates the laying of the foundation stone for the St David's College, Lampeter, on the 12th of August 1822. In marking this milestone, the university is celebrating the foundation of higher education in Wales and the role of the original St David's College, Lampeter, in that story. Bishop Thomas Burgess and the founders of St David's College saw the need to empower Welsh scholars to have a university education. As well as the Vice-Chancellor, a member of the governing body and chair of the representative body, the Provost of the Lampeter and Carmarthen campuses, Mr Gwilym Dyfry-Jones, will also present to introduce the report. Professor Hughes.
Medwyn Hughes, ex officio, member of the governing body. Colleagues, it's been fantastic to listen, isn't it, over the last 20 minutes to planting, creating new churches, new Christian communities, and celebrating the first anniversary in Citizen Church. Well, we've been partying as well in the University of Wales, of focusing on 200 years. 200 years of continual lifelong learning in Wales. Bishop Burgess had a vision that he felt that Wales should also have the opportunity to train future Christian leaders within the diocese and within the province. Of course, at that time, the scholarships from Bangor and also from Llandaff secured that the youngsters of Wales went to Oxford. But unfortunately for the Wild West, there was no funding. And that's why he created St David's College. 200 years, on August the 12th, 2022, hundreds of people marched through Lampeter to celebrate the lifelong learning commitment of an Anglican college, an Anglican university in Wales, the oldest royal chartered university in England and Wales after Oxford and Cambridge, the only university in Wales that was committed within its royal charter to place an Anglican clause. And I'm very pleased of that as Vice-Chancellor. You have, hopefully, in your electronic information, received the annual report. And that report will cover so many areas. It'll tell the story, the narrative of how a very small college in West Wales, with only 200 students, even 12, 13 years ago, turned now to a university that serves Wales in the context of Carmarthen, Swansea, Lampeter, Cardiff, and Widerfield, with over 22,000. We also have focused on transforming education, transforming lives, giving those individuals, perhaps, who never thought of going to university, of that opportunity of having that university education. Because education can transform lives. And what you see in that annual report is the opportunity of what we've been doing. I could refer on education, I could refer to the work we're doing in religious education, and also to the importance of that work for the future in Wales. The Archbishop noted last time when we met, 15% of all the children, primary children in Wales within church primary schools. So much opportunity to develop a network, a professional network of teachers. You will see a reference to St. Padans. I should note, the question has been asked in the context of the duality of interest I have, at the moment at least, as chair of the representative body and also as vice-chancellor, given that the university accredits part of St. Padans' work. I can confirm that all the work linked to St. Padan is not undertaken by myself, and any discussions at the RB will be chaired by my deputy, just for clarification on that particular point. 2022 is an opportunity to look back, but far more important than that, to look forward, to celebrate and to establish what does it mean to have a new confederal university for Wales. We have launched the development of new technical universities across the country. Again, all linked to this particular Anglican university here in Wales. This will be the last time that I present the report, as I will be taking my leave from my particular role within the university. But it's been a fascinating story, a fascinating journey, how the oldest university college in Wales continues and indeed secured the future of a transformed University of Wales. I therefore ask the governing body to receive the report of the University of Wales, Trinity St David.
Archbishop, are you prepared to second the motion?
I am the chair formally. I second the motion.
Thank you. So there is an opportunity now to comment, question on what you've heard from Professor Hughes before we move on to a vote. Would anybody like to come up to the podium to raise any questions, observations, following what you've heard?
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, Archbishop of Wales. Could I, rather than saying anything about the report, just take this opportunity to congratulate Professor Medwyn Hughes on his time as Chancellor of that university and all that's been gifted to Wales, not just to the Church, but to Wales, in terms of the work that you've done and in the leadership you've offered to that institution, which, as you've said, has been and has made an enormous contribution to the life of our nation. We, as a church, but as a nation, owe you a debt of thanks, which we now give. Thank you very much.
So if there are no questions or observations for Professor Hughes, the decision before us is by a simple majority of the governing body. And the vote that I'm going to ask you to undertake is that the governing body receives the report of the University of Wales, Trinity St David. If you're in favour of receiving it, if you could show your cards. If anybody is against, please show. Are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. We now move on then to agenda item number 14. And the next item for us to receive here is first-hand feedback following the recent Lambeth Conference. You will have received, hopefully, the background note of the Lambeth Conference report, and the Archbishop will speak to us about the 2022 Lambeth Conference. Just by way of background, the Lambeth Conference, which recently took place at Canterbury, is one of the 4 instruments of the unity of Anglicanism, the others being the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Anglican Consultative Council, and the Primates Meeting. Members will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the item, and the Archbishop will respond to any questions. And if you do ask questions, can I just remind you to introduce yourselves, your diocese, and the order you represent. Archbishop.
Chair, thank you. Andrew, Archbishop of Wales. The report that is before you is comprehensive, I think, in the way in which it outlines our gathering which took place recently in Canterbury. So I won't address anything that is there in that report. Let me instead tell you 2 stories. I want to tell you first of all about Bishop Zechariah. Bishop Zechariah, isn't that a great name? Was one of the bishops who was in attendance and they're from the province of South Sudan. When Zechariah was sharing with us in the Bible study groups that we were gathered together to look at 1 Peter, he told us a little bit about his diocese, which at that time was underwater, literally. Apart from 2 parishes, which were not, the whole of his diocese was flooded. And it was flooded partly because of climate change, another province feeling the effects, the immediate effects of climate change. But it was there because of a geopolitical situation which we don't know much about, but in which water, which was being managed further up the Nile Valley, was letting out intermittently different amounts of water, partly because of hydroelectric schemes. But the consequence to them and to their diocese was that they were experiencing flooding on an ongoing basis. So what's that like for Zechariah? Well, it was interesting, him taking a confirmation service up to his waist in stinking water in his cathedral. Part of the life that they live in the south of Sudan. But that's not all. Just 2 weeks before he came to us, he was shot at. Shot at? Yes, he told us. Because he'd been preaching against some of the corruption that's endemic to life in that part of their country. And so a rogue bishop who'd been deposed had sent 2 or 3 hitters to take him and his colleagues out. But they missed. Instead, they shot the plaster behind him, and as he turned to look, the plaster shattered, and he pointed to his lip, and he said, "And I was cut here." And that was the cause of the cut on his lip, which he showed us. Part of the everyday life of what it means to be a Christian in the south of Sudan. And then there was Jeremiah. What a great name for a bishop. Another one, Jeremiah, who was from Liberia. And he was a much quieter person than was Zechariah. Spoke about life again, how difficult it was, the poverty they live with each day. 2 days after he got back, his archbishop posted on the Primates WhatsApp group, oh yes, we have a WhatsApp group, that there'd been an outbreak of killing, and systematically the government was shooting Christian churches, Christian leaders, and Christian disciples across the whole of that country. Again, something that doesn't make the news, but why would it? But in that part of their country, something that they live with constantly, fearing for their life as they stand up for Jesus Christ. And as I reflect on those 2 bishops and their stories, for all of us who were there, the Welsh bishops, the energy isn't really to be found, although this is significant. What I've written here is important. The energy was in the conversations that we had, one-to-one with other bishops, the networks and the friendships that we make, and what we learn about what it's like to be a Christian and a leader in parts of this world. The hazards, the challenges, and the opportunities. 2 stories which show the value of listening, of gathering, and of hearing from what God is doing and what life is like in other parts of the communion. Would you please particularly pray for those 2 bishops, for Jeremiah and for Zechariah? Will you pray for the church in Liberia? Will you please pray for the church in the south of Sudan, facing enormous challenges in different ways? But of course, if you want to address anything in this, I'll seek to answer your questions. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you. So you've had the opportunity to read the report and also hear directly from the Archbishop. Are there any questions or comments that anybody would want to make in connection with the recent Lambeth conference? Okay, thank you very much. Well, we then move on then to the penultimate item before, or the last item before moving on to evening prayer. And the last item is agenda item number 15. And this is a session that relates to the year of prayer. Now, initially, I was going to introduce Bishop John Lomas to come up and introduce a video. But the very first thing that you would see on the video is Bishop John Lomas introducing the video. So we're going to cut Bishop John Lomas. You've seen him, but you can see him now on screen instead. So if you could please play the video of the year of prayer.
Why should we pray? Prayer not only helps us to deepen our faith, but takes us beyond ourselves to the wider world. To sit quietly at home in prayer has been shown to help improve our general well-being. It's a time to bring to God whatever we feel we need to say. An old prayer has these words in it: "In the changes and chances of this fleeting world," which relates to the world of today. All that has been experienced in recent years, the ongoing call for justice and peace, an end to conflict and war, the concerns for a sustainable environment and climate. I'm very pleased to be able to invite you and encourage you to join in a year of prayer, beginning in September and continuing until August 2023. This has been put together by the Provincial Spirituality Group and opens up, very simply, a different approach to prayer each month. Some you may be familiar with, some you may like, some may be new, some may not be the right way for you. The prayers offered will be a mix of prayer for our personal journey and prayer for the wider community in the world. Each month, there'll be a theme, a Bible passage, a reflection, a particular way of prayer, from using our imaginations, going on a prayer walk, a labyrinth, intercessions, suggestions for music, art, books, and for further prayer, and so much more. Importantly, it is to pray in the way that you are most comfortable with. And as John O'Donoghue writes in his book, Eternal Echoes, prayer should be the wild dance of the heart too. In the silence of our prayer, we should be able to sense the roguish smile of a joyful God, who despite all the chaos and imperfection, ultimately shelters everything. Please do join us when our year of prayer is launched on the 7th and the 8th of September. You'll find it on the Church in Wales website, on Facebook, webinars, Zoom. To God we pray from the depths of our hearts, out of the concerns we carry deep within, for a deepening understanding of your presence, your peace, your healing love, within us and the world. May this adventure in prayer be filled with joy and with laughter, with hopefulness and with promise, and the sense of your roguish smile upon us. Amen.
So I commend to you all the year of prayer, and as Bishop John just said, the information can be found, well, it's launching today and tomorrow on the Church in Wales website, plus other social media platforms. So thank you very much for that.